I was bonded to the government then, and I had to pay off a 5-figure sum in Singapore dollars to the government to just, drop out of school 9 months before graduation to do this. The 5-figure sum that she had loaned me was actually her life savings.
Our guest today is someone many of you would be very familiar with. You or your female significant other may even have her clothes in the wardrobe. Well, not her clothes, literally, but the clothes that she's designed, her clothes from this homegrown brand. What started as a blog shop in the early 2000s. Do you remember those? Wow. It has now grown into a multi-million-dollar empire with boutiques spanning across Asia. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome to the Money Talks podcast, Rachel Lim. She's co-founder of fashion retailer Love Bonito.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Hi, Andrea. Good to be here.
It's so good to have you here. I'm really excited to get into this conversation. You're not just a well-known entrepreneur. You lead a very public life as a social media influencer. You've been interviewed multiple times as well by the media.
But seldom about money.
Aha.
I think that's a topic that, I don't usually openly talk about.
Right.
Financial literacy wasn't taught when I was in school, when I was younger.
Right.
So I think having to navigate that on my own is, still a journey.
Yeah, it is. And it is for me as well. And that's why we have this podcast. It's exactly why we have people like you on the show as well. So let us in on a little something first, just to get us started. Tell us one thing that not many people know about you and they'd be surprised to find out.
I love chocolates and I
Okay.
actually don't share my desserts. So
Wow.
Andrea, if I ever offer you, please don't take my desserts, please. I really love, I don't believe in sharing desserts. I think I work so hard to have my own desserts. So if you want, please just order on your own. So
Point taken. I will remember this fact the next time if we ever have a
Yes.
lunch together.
Yes.
I'll order my own dessert. I want to take you back now to the very beginnings of Love Bonito.
Yeah.
You dropped out of university. You broke a government bond and you had to borrow a 5-figure sum from your mom as well to run the original iteration of Love Bonito, which
Yes.
back then was called Bonito Chico, the
Yeah.
blog shop. Good old days, yeah? Now, some would call this brave. Others might actually even call it foolish, at the time at least, right? What was going through your mind when all of this was happening?
We started on a live journal platform, which was really like back then, the eBay of Singapore.
Yeah.
And back then, this was 19 years ago, way before social media existed, way before smartphones then.
I know.
And how people wired money was really sending cold hard cash in an envelope, affixing a stamp,
Yes.
and then snail mailing it to us.
Exactly.
Or they would do an ATM transfer, scan the receipt, and email it to us because
Yep.
no smartphones.
Yeah.
How it started was a couple of my friends and I came together because we wanted to sell our pre-loved clothes online for extra pocket money. After a while of doing that, we ran out of clothes to sell, but people kept coming back for more. So we decided to use the money that we had saved to go overseas to import clothes to sell. This was like weekends or school term break. But while doing that, I realized that, hey, what's available in the market? It's not really as well made as I wish it would be. There was always something that I wish I could change about it, be it the color, the fit, the quality, the texture, the fabric, the design. All the international brands that were coming into Asia were created primarily for the European American women
Yeah.
who have very different needs, body proportion, and maybe even climate than us in Asia. So in my final year of university with no fashion, no business, no design background, decided to drop out of school to start the business proper with my co-founders, to start designing and manufacturing our own collections. I think we had some years of, testing the market, knowing that there is a need, knowing that, okay, we have some momentum. I was bonded to the government then, and I had to pay off a 5-figure sum in Singapore dollars to the government to just drop out of school 9 months before graduation to do this. And I remember because I didn't have that sum of money, I had to go to my mom, to ask her, could you lend me the sum of money to break the bond, to start the business, know. And she was like, why don't you just finish, get a cert?
Yeah, it was 9 months left. Yeah.
If anything, you can fall back on it, And what's this online business that you're doing? Is it even legal? Will the government authorities come after you? Because back then, it wasn't anything like it is today.
Correct, yeah.
And I think, my mom also saw that, okay, I was already doing this on the side and it was amounting to something small. But at least she saw that, okay, you know what, I'm just gonna let you try and see how it goes.
Wow.
It's not like as if I come from a very well-to-do family.
Right.
Back then, my dad was going through bankruptcy. My mom was already working 2 jobs to support the family.
Right.
And so essentially, I realized only a couple of years later, the 5-figure sum that she had loaned me was actually her life savings.
Oh.
And she had essentially, emptied her life savings to almost like take a bet on me. I'm forever grateful to my mom for that.
I think it's a 5-figure gamble on your mother's part.
For
and
sure.
I'm sure she
For
feels
sure.
today that it's paid off.
I mean, thankfully, but
Right.
yeah, you can imagine back then, like she was so fearful and worried. Plus, family members, my uncles, relatives were all like, oh, is this, why are you doing this?
Chinese
It's
New Year must have
silly."
been hard for you.
and her. Online shopping isn't like a buzzword like it is today.
Yeah.
So back then, it was really a real gamble for her.
Yeah. So let's talk about what you mentioned earlier, your father going through bankruptcy. And this was during the Asian financial crisis. A lot of
Yeah.
families were hit hard. Yours was not excluded from this. And your mom took on multiple jobs, as you said. You all moved into a 1-room flat even at one stage, right?
Yeah.
And how did going through that ordeal shape you into how you became the entrepreneur you are today, growing that business, investing your money? I mean, was that the drive? Was that the source of that drive to say, okay, it
Yeah.
is do or die. I need this to succeed?
Well, that's a great question. I think, when back then, with what I went through with my family of, going through bankruptcy together, staying in a 1-room flat together, and not just 1-room flat, we're literally just in 1 room. It really taught me a lot about the value of money, hard work, and to also be frugal. Andrea, I remember times and days where we would just, as a family, sometimes just walk past coffee shops and, see the ban mian store and be like, oh, maybe, we can have this once a month. It's not even something like
Ban mian, the thing that we have every day
we
nowadays.
take for granted,
Wow.
And back then to us, it's like we can only walk past and wish like, okay, it'll be a treat once a month for us, and things like that. And that also really taught me in that sense that, okay, I need to learn to work hard for money if I want to. And money is more also like a means to an end. How I viewed money growing up was also like a tool to stability and security. Not so much like growing money and wealth accumulation, but really also in terms of like with whatever money that we earn, how can we save and protect it as much as possible instead of thinking of how to grow it as much as possible. So that was the mindset that I had growing up and going through that with my family.
Your 2 kids are growing up in, I would say, a comfortable environment, right? At least compared to when you were growing up, where their parents are doing relatively well, you and your husband. Now, your oldest child, Ollie, he's in school now?
He's in school now.
Yeah. Okay. And before you know it, he's going to go into primary school and he's going to learn how to handle his own money. How have you introduced the concept of money to your son?
Yeah.
What are those conversations like?
Yeah. Ollie right now, as we speak, he is 3, turning 4 at the end of the year. My husband Leo and I, we do talk about also like we want our kids, and Kira, my daughter, she's turning 1 soon, but we also talk about how we want to raise our kids, especially when it comes to different aspects and the financial literacy is one of them. Even now, when we plan for holidays and trips, we openly share with my son Ollie, like, okay, this is the budget that we have for the trip. In terms of expenses that we're gonna set aside for this 4-day trip. This is how Dada Mama we're gonna spend on food, and how we're gonna spend on like some rides or seeing some places, and the remaining we can decide how we want to spend it, whether to buy a gift or a toy for which is like granddad. And I think it's also really introducing him to the concept that we have a budget and learning how to stick with it. And secondly, also how to prioritize which to spend first, what is a necessity versus a want. The other thing, that my husband and I speak about is also when our kids grow up, we would also hope that, we would be able to expose them and share with them that money is also not just something that we can use for ourselves, to give us what we want and what we need. But also it would be an important tool to be able to make a difference in someone's life through donating.
Right.
Right. And we want to be able to also introduce them to the concept that, when we receive some money, perhaps do we want to think about setting aside a portion of it so that we can eventually donate to maybe the underprivileged kids or families. And that's also how we want to be able to introduce them slowly as they grow older. Sometimes when Ollie demands for toys, it's also reminding him that, hey, Ollie, actually you already have, 2 other trucks. Do you really need a third? There are a lot of people who don't even have one.
There's an interesting headline about you on a parenting site that I picked up. It implies that you're proof that women can have it all. A successful career, 2 healthy children, a happy marriage. I don't know if I necessarily agree, that women can have it all so easily. It's not without a fight. Yes, women can have it all as long as they have the financial means to do so. What do you think of this?
I wouldn't say that I have it all. I think, it's really such an evolving journey where I have had so many mistakes and lessons and failures in different aspects and areas of my life that have also opened up my eyes to learn to be a lot more intentional in my choices and learn to be a lot more intentional in recognizing what season I'm in and what are my priorities this season. I had a mentor who told me before, she said, Rach, we wear many hats, especially as women. We are leaders, parents, moms, daughters, and wives and so many other hats as well. She said you need to know in each season that you're going through, in the balls that you juggle and the responsibilities that you juggle, which ones are made of glass and which ones are made of rubber.
Wow.
Where you can afford to drop the rubber ball.
Sure.
And, it will bounce back up in that season. But be sure to recognize which ones are made of glass, where if you drop them, it would never be the same. It would shatter. And I think for me, it's also, coming to terms and recognizing that, okay, in this stage of my life or in this season of my life, what aspects are balls that I can drop and what aspects are balls that I cannot drop. And there have been seasons where I have dropped the wrong ball. I dropped the ball of marriage, where I neglected my marriage. But through a lot of hard work, and backpedaling and reworking on ourselves, we were able to salvage that. But it really was such a reminder for me to prioritize my time and energy and not focus on the wrong thing. And more importantly, not be focused on wanting to have it all for the sake of, I don't know what, at the end of the day. So I think women can have it all, but not all at once. Yeah.
You were able to come to this conclusion through a lot of help. And some of this help required the hiring of a life coach, mentorship, going for marriage counseling, having a helper, having a very supportive husband at home to take care of the kids if you ever need to take time off for work, to travel, etc. The thing is, many women don't have the same option. What do you say to that? I mean, is it really possible to still be able to come to this conclusion, fix themselves, find the solutions without necessarily having the financial means to do so?
Yeah. We are so privileged and fortunate to be able to live in a world where information, coaches, and education is actually very accessible to us at very little cost. If you have a smartphone, if you have internet access, there is so much more that you can gain and reach and harness at really almost no cost. It's just how much you're going to put aside your time and energy to focusing on that. I have experienced almost having nothing or very little growing up too. And I think it wasn't an excuse for me to say like, oh, okay, I can't learn or I can't be mentally strong because I don't have access to pay for a coach, for example.
That's right.
But I think it's also through even like going to the library to read. books, leadership books,
And
or
that's
learning
free.
from people. We don't have an excuse. On social media, there are so many accounts of different thought leaders, coaches, therapists online that gives us so much tools and insights to become better, to become stronger versions of ourselves. So I think, in that sense, we all have to and can start somewhere. And the only help is not necessarily one that you need to always fork out money to pay for.
Yeah.
And I think it's also at the end of the day, I always ask and think like, why is it that sometimes, when we want to buy something fancier, like whether is it Starbucks coffee
Yeah.
or, a nice handbag, why is it that we almost always don't think twice? But when it comes to getting help, paying for therapy or coaching session, we will always, we would not be as willing to,
Yeah.
right? I think it's really at the end of the day, how can we reframe investing in ourselves? Not just the material things, which is also important to a certain
Sure,
extent,
yeah.
but also at the end of the day, how about the intangible things that would ultimately also make us a better version of ourselves, which is so important because the better we become, the stronger we become, the more the people around us, our kids, our families, our teams get to benefit too. So I think it's really reframing all of that.
So I'm not going to ask you if you regret anything, but to young people out there who want to follow in your footsteps and now hearing your story, starting a business, but they
Yeah.
don't have the funds for it, what is your advice to them?
Please don't follow in my footsteps because I think like all of us have a very different and unique path in our journey. And it's so important to discover what that is for each and every one of us.
Right.
Secondly, I would also say, to live life as a series of experiment. No one thing, no one project is going to define you for the rest of your life. Neither is one failure going to defeat you for the rest of your life. Every 6 months, you review, tweak, adjust. I think it will be a lot lighter in that sense where you don't have to feel that, in my 20s, I need to get this right.
Yeah.
The one thing that I'm going to work on has to be the thing that I'm going to do for
Yeah.
the rest of my life.
Right.
It has to be right. If we were to reframe that and look at it as just like a data point, like, okay, this was interesting and this was what I discovered about myself, and then I'm going to tweak accordingly, that would be a lot lighter, and you will find that you will also be a lot more open to different opportunities.
That's right. That feeling of liberation
Exactly.
opens your mind.
Exactly. And to so much more. And don't always feel like the next thing or the one thing that you do needs to be the one thing for the rest of your life. So I would say live your life as a series of experiments and be very curious, be very open to, looking at the lessons in each season.
I just want to take you back once more to when you were just starting Love Bonito.
Yeah.
And you borrowed money from your mom. It just occurred to me that you're borrowing money from a family member. Now, I don't know about you, but I grew up being told, never to borrow money from cousins, aunties, your siblings. You don't want to be indebted for the wrong reasons, that sort of stuff. And that warning has stuck with me throughout my life. So to young entrepreneurs out there or young upstarts who want to get
Yeah.
raring to go, what would you recommend in terms of keeping business and family
Yeah.
separate? I mean,
Yeah.
why did you go ahead anyway
Yeah.
and in your time? And what would you say to the younger people?
Yeah. As much as possible, don't be in a place where you need to borrow money. But if you really have to, I think for me, I honestly had no other choice because at that time too, I couldn't go to anyone else. I was in my 20s, early 20s.
You couldn't get a bank loan.
Yeah, and none of my friends or the people I knew back then, had a 5-figure sum
Yeah.
of money. So in that sense, I had no choice, and it was my mom that I had to turn to. And thankfully, it didn't ruin our relationship.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, but I think, at the end of the day, I would always say, start small. One advice that I would give today is if you really are so passionate about starting something, don't quit your day job entirely first. Still have it on the side while you're taking the non-work hours
Yeah.
to then hone and work on your passion project till it gets to a point where you have momentum, you have a minimum viable product, and you're confident that it would take off if you were to spend more resources and time on it.
You know the saying, money isn't everything. But those without money will say, well, you can say that because you have money. So what would your response be to that? What's your take on this money isn't everything?
Yeah. I think as to everything in life, the definition of money, the definition of success, the definition of happiness, it really differs and depends on the state of life and the situation that you're in. And it's okay that it differs for each of us,
Oh, yeah.
and the goal should be that, of course, we slowly climb up the hierarchy of needs. But what I would say is like remembering at the end of the day that yes, money is an important tool and we shouldn't just deny that.
I liked how you described them as seasons in your life. I think it depends on the season of life that you
Yeah.
are at. What financial advice would you give to your 20-year-old self, and especially knowing
Yeah.
what you went through in your 20s?
I would say to 20-year-old Rachel to learn to invest, learn to start investing. Growing up, like I said, right, we were only taught to earn money and save it, earn money and save it,
Yep.
right? And financial literacy also was not taught in school. And I learned at the end of the day that, hey, you can earn money, you can save it. Yes, it's important, but you can also grow your money
Yeah.
and let your money work for you. And the thing is, I wish I had started investing much earlier because as we all know, our investments would compound.
Yeah.
Growing up, I was only taught that okay, investment is only for the rich. I would spend more time reading up on how to start investing for my capacity and means back then. Even if it's just, putting aside $1 a day and putting it into investment funds, for example.
Yeah.
I wish I had known a lot more on that.
Yeah, you and I both, we grew up in the same era, but you know what? This is why we have so much access, as you said today,
Yes.
than we did before. And this is why we have the Money Talks podcast. So,
Yes.
Rachel, thank you once again for gracing your presence on our podcast.
Thank
We
you for
really
having
appreciate
me.
it. Now, listener, we hope you enjoyed this exclusive series on the Money Talks podcast. Let us know what you think about it and maybe even send us a wish list of who you would like to see next. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube Music. Don't forget to rate us while you're there if you're enjoying the podcast. Big thanks to the team, Crispina Robert, Tiffany Ang, Junaini Johari, Joanne Chan, and Saya Wind. I'm Andrea Heng. Thank you for listening and watching Money Talks.